Let's be honest. When you hear the word uranium, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Nuclear weapons Chernobyl, the Simpsons cartoon with those glowing green rods dripping radioactive goo? If you grew up in the 80s, you know exactly what that feeling was. The vague dread of nuclear war, duck and cover drills at school, lying in bed as a kid staring at the ceiling, wondering what would happen if a bomb dropped nearby. But it turns out, the very thing that kept a whole generation awake at night in fear is also what keeps the lights on in your home right now. And the story of how a rough piece of rock buried underground becomes the electricity powering entire cities is the most incredible story you've never been told. Welcome to Secrets of Everyday Things, the channel where everyday secrets are uncovered and explained. It starts in a place you've almost certainly never heard of, northern Saskatchewan, Canada, middle of December. The temperature outside is 30 degrees below 0 Celsius, cold enough that your breath freezes the moment it leaves your mouth. But beneath the snow, beneath the frozen ground, another 500 meters straight down into the earth, something has been lying perfectly still for 2 billion years. 2 billion years. Back when Earth had no multicellular life, when oxygen didn't even exist in the atmosphere yet. The chunk of rock that miners at Cigar Lake Mine named U-465 had been waiting patiently, not knowing that one day it would light up the kitchen of an ordinary family in Ohio. Here is the most insane thing you'll hear today: that rock, despite containing enough theoretical energy to power more than 400 homes for an entire year, is completely useless the moment it's pulled out of the ground. Nature is playing a cruel joke. Cigar Lake is the highest grade uranium mine on the planet, at 16% purity. While most other mines in the world celebrate hitting even 0.5%, and yet this golden treasure, the moment it's dug up, still cannot power a single light bulb for even 1 second. Getting U-465 out of the ground required engineers to do something that sounds like science fiction. They built an underground ice fortress. The uranium ore sits beneath water-saturated sandstone and without special measures. Drilling into it would be like trying to dig a hole in the middle of the ocean. Niagara Falls pouring through your ceiling is the closest image to describe it. The solution was to drive 200 massive steel pipes into the ground surrounding the mining zone, each one taking 8 days to install. Up on the surface, a refrigeration plant pumped calcium chloride brine cooled to 30 below zero through the entire pipe system. The water surrounding the ore froze solid, creating underground ice walls holding back millions of gallons of groundwater just waiting to rush in. And inside a sealed booth 50 meters away, an operator guided remote-controlled equipment, watching through a camera feed as a machine that looked like a steel octopus with wheeled tentacles chewed through rock. At 10:47 in the morning, U-465 broke free. 2 billion years of waiting ended in less than a single second. But this was only the first step of a journey you could never have imagined. U-465 got ground into slurry, pumped to the surface, and loaded onto truck number 47. And that truck was not your average 18-wheeler. It was built like a rolling vault. Reinforced steel walls, radiation shielding, GPS tracking monitored around the clock by the International Atomic Energy Agency. The route was classified information. The driver wasn't even allowed to tell his wife and kids which highways he'd be taking. And the funny thing, nobody was worried about theft. Raw uranium is nearly useless. What everyone worried about was accidents. One traffic collision could scatter radioactive material across miles of highway. That driver remembers his very first uranium run, hands shaking, eyes constantly checking the mirrors, imagining every car behind him was a threat. Now, after more than 2,000 trips, he knows the real enemy isn't out there on the road. It's the complacency that grows inside you. That's why the radiation badge still gets checked every hour without fail. Every single trip. When the truck arrived at the processing mill, U-465 went through its first chemical transformation. Acid stronger than sulfuric acid dissolved the uranium while leaving the worthless rock minerals behind. Think of salt and sand pour in water. The salt dissolves. Filter out the sand. Evaporate the water. And pure salt crystals remain. U-465 went through essentially the same process, except instead of water. It used acid strong enough to eat through steel, and instead of salt, it was uranium. The murky liquid slowly changed color, from muddy brown to clear golden yellow, like watching thick mud gradually turn into honey. After baking at 1085 degrees Celsius, hotter than the melting point of copper, U-465 emerged as jet black powder, packed into a 210-liter steel drum built to survive a train collision. But this still wasn't the most nerve-wracking part. Because at this point, U-465 only contained 0.7% uranium, 235 the one isotope capable of splitting and releasing energy. To become reactor fuel, that number had to reach at least 3 to 5%. And nobody, absolutely nobody, had an easy way to make that happen. Because U-235 and U-238 are chemically identical. They are perfect twins. You can't use magnets. You can't use chemistry to tell them apart. The only difference is weight. U-235 is about 1.26% lighter than U-238. Imagine a pair of identical twins. Same height, same face, differing by only about 2 pounds on a 150-pound body. How do you separate them in a crowd of millions? The answer came from a classified facility whose name and location remain secret information. And the process required to get there is even stranger. At the Port Hope Conversion Facility in Ontario, U-465 had to go through a transformation that makes your skin crawl just thinking about it. The lead chemist stood behind a blast-proof window and controlled the moment when fluorine, one of the most reactive elements in all of nature, attacked U-465 at 550 degrees Celsius. Flames flared through the observation port. Pressure gauges shot into the red zone. U-465 had just become uranium hexafluoride, UF6, a gas that when it contacts moist air instantly creates hydrofluoric acid, the substance most notorious in forensic medicine for its ability to penetrate skin and dissolve bones from the inside out. The entire facility was built from special nickel alloys and aluminum, the only materials tough enough to survive UF6's corrosiveness. The ironic thing is that experts rate the chemical hazard of UF6 as even higher than its radioactive hazard. This isn't the most radioactive substance in the room, it's the most corrosive. But why go through all this? Because UF6 is the only uranium compound that exists as a gas at a manageable temperature. And as a gas, physics can finally separate U-235 from U-238 using that tiny weight difference. Now U-465 in gas form traveled to a uranium enrichment plant. Thousands of centrifuges arranged in long rows inside a building whose location is classified. Each one is a stainless steel cylinder spinning at 90,000 revolutions per minute, or 1,500 revolutions per second, nearly twice as fast as the engine of an F-16 fighter jet at full throttle. When the UF6 gas was fed in, centrifugal force pushed the heavier U-238 outward toward the walls, while the lighter U-235 concentrated near the center. Each individual machine only enriched it a little, but hundreds. Then thousands of machines in series, step by step, pushed the U-235 concentration from 0.7% to 3%, then 4%, then 5%. When U-465 hit its target concentration, it was converted back into oxide powder and pressed into tiny ceramic pellets, no bigger than your fingertip. And here is the number I need you to stop and really sit with for a moment. One uranium pellet smaller than your fingertip contains the same energy as 1 full ton of coal, or 149 gallons of gasoline, or 17,000 cubic feet of natural gas. You can cup in your palm something equivalent in energy to an entire truckload of coal, and you won't feel a thing because it weighs just a few grams. Every pellet was inspected under microscopes with the precision of a surgical suite. A hairline crack invisible to the naked eye could trigger a catastrophic failure worth millions of dollars inside a reactor. Pellets that passed were loaded into zirconium alloy tubes, each engineered to withstand pressures that would crush a submarine. Those tubes got assembled into fuel bundles that looked like metallic flowers, beautiful and deadly at the same time. And then the journey ended at a nuclear power plant, where the reactor vessel opened to receive U-465 and its companions. The reactor is a steel cathedral taller than a 4-story building with walls nearly a meter thick. When robotic arms placed each fuel bundle into its exact position, and the control rods slowly withdrew. What scientists had dreamed of since the late 1800s finally happened. The first U-235 atom split, then the second, then billions in a single second. Each splitting releasing heat and more neutrons to feed the next cycle. Water boiled. Steam spun turbines. Electricity flowed. Hospital operating rooms stayed lit at 3 in the morning. Your heater ran through the blizzard night. The screen you're watching this video on right now stayed bright. All of that. Possibly being fed by a chunk of rock that spent 2 billion years sitting in the dark underground. But there's one thing in this story we rarely stop to think about. Uranium was not created on Earth. It was forged inside supernova explosions. When stars far larger than our sun died in the biggest blast the universe has ever seen, flinging heavy atoms out into space. Those atoms drifted for billions of years. Then one day got pulled into the gravity of a young star system forming, mixed together with dust and gas and rock, and became our Earth. From there, uranium sank deep into the ground, slowly radioactive, generating geothermal heat, driving plate tectonics, maintaining the magnetic field that shields us from cosmic radiation. Uranium helped create the conditions that made life possible on this planet, and now it's powering the civilization that grew out of that life. The driver hauling 48 drums through the Rocky Mountains said something I can't stop thinking about. He was basically hauling stardust. And he was right in the most literal sense possible. Do you remember the 80s post-apocalyptic nuclear movies? Sleepless Nights over the Cold War, Chernobyl in 1986, and an entire generation of Americans deciding nuclear power was just too dangerous. Maybe their fear made sense at the time, but maybe the story is more complicated than that. Right now, roughly 93 nuclear reactors across the United States are providing about 20% of the entire country's electricity, with 0 grams of carbon released in the process. And while the world wrestles with climate change, the thing we once feared most is turning out to be one of the cleanest hopes we have. That worthless rock from deep in the Canadian earth traveled through an underground ice fortress. A secret truck whose route no one was allowed to know. Laboratories where just hearing the names of the chemicals inside was enough to make your hair stand up. And machines spinning faster than you can imagine to separate two things that were almost impossible to tell apart. All of that, so that the lights in your home can turn on like the most ordinary thing in the world. And that is what's truly most incredible here. Not the science, not the technology, but the fact that the most extraordinary things are hiding inside the things we assume are the most ordinary.